Well, hello, Matt. We're joining you again. Having looked at some of the sports grounds last week, we're going to have a look at two more today, and probably two of the more famous sports grounds in Limerick that are still in use. And of course, one which has been developed in the last 10 years or so, and one which, of course, is undergoing development even as we speak. And new parcels of land have been purchased in the last number of months to help with that development. So first of all, today we're going to look, before we go into the Gaelic grounds and looking at that and Park out on the Ennis Road, we're going to go down the road a small little bit. If you threw a stone from the Gaelic grounds, of course, you'd hit Thomond Park. And Thomond Park, of course, is now regarded as one of the finest rugby stadiums in the world. In fact, it was voted that a number of years ago. Of course, it's to anybody who has been there on Heineken Cup Day or any of the big match days, it really is a cathedral of sport, and something I suppose that as Limerick people we're extremely proud of. But it hasn't been there forever, Matt.
No. I suppose, just to echo some of your earlier comments, it's actually the 12th largest stadium in the whole of Ireland, north and south. It has a capacity of 25,600, and it's actually the second largest non-GAA stadium in Ireland. Because if you think of the 50 largest stadiums in Ireland, all but 13 are GAA stadia. In other words, 37 are GAA and 13 are not GAA. But the largest non-GAA stadium in the country is the Aviva Stadium with a capacity of 51,000. And then comes Thomond Park with 25,000 odd. So I suppose that's it actually just reinforces your introductory remarks about the significance of Thomond Park in Ireland and internationally. But to go back to its origins then, the Markets Field was, of course, the centre of sport in Limerick from the 1880s to the 1920s, in that it was the headquarters of rugby and the GAA in Limerick. And the GAA, as we'll talk about later on, moved out in 1928. And this then, in turn, put pressure on the IRFU because, of course, there was always a rivalry between the two. And many in the IRFU felt, or the Munster branch of the IRFU, felt, if the GAA can move out and establish their own stadium, why can't we? So there was a considerable amount of discussion on the topic. And then in 1931, a field which was known as Foley's Field, which is probably slightly ironic considering the iconic name of Foley, but Foley's Field in Hass's Cross became available. It was 12.5 acres, 6.5 acres, and it was purchased for £1,150 by the local rugby organisation, and actually a subscription was taken up. They asked for 50 people to give £20 each to defray the cost of purchasing this field, but in fact 100 people contributed £20 each, so they actually had 2,000, so they had more than they required. And only then did the IRFU, the national IRFU, then come on board. They were a little bit iffy to begin with, but they then put they put a grant of £1,500 towards the purchase of the field, and in that manner, then Thomond Park got started, and it was the project was greatly assisted then when in 1934 Bohemians became the first tenants of Thomond Park. Incidentally, the name Thomond Park came about in a very sort of banal fashion. It was just simply called Thomond Park because it was situated in Thomondgate. There was nothing more, nothing less to it. So it's amazing how a name was almost stumbled upon by accident and then has taken on almost mythical connotations since then.
Just to backtrack a little bit, from the move from the Markets Field to Thomond Park, and of course some wonderful games, and we'll look at those again at another time, played in the Markets Field by Munster Rugby before ever the move. But it wasn't without its problems, Matt, and things when you think now of Thomond Park and all of the wondrous events that have happened there, the Miracle Match and the All Blacks matches, and all of the great Heineken days and all of that. It had very humble beginnings.
It had very humble beginnings because I suppose the first match played there was on the 17th of November 1934. It was between Bows and Young Munster, so that inaugurated the Thomond Park. But among the many unfavourable comments that were made at the time were one by a local reporter. He said, this unsheltered plateau, that was Thomond Park, is not likely to draw as many spectators as the Markets Field. And there was a lot of unfavourable comparisons made between the Markets Field and the new ground because it was considered to be very windswept. The seating arrangements were quite poor. In fact, it was so amateurish to begin with that, for example, I just quote here a little. It says, legend has it, this is from the book Where Miracles Happened by Charlie Mulqueen and Brendan O'Dowd. It said, legend has it that a court action needed to be settled to reconcile a dispute over grazing rights, and even that the death of a cow delayed the first match actually taking place for another 3 years. So, I mean, there was sort of, Kilnascully-esque or Father Ted-esque elements to the early years of Thomond Park. But it's only fair to point out that those teething problems were soon overcome. And, for example, between 1937 and 1938, the first stand was built in Thomond Park. So within a relatively short time, we'd say, of the opening of Thomond Park, they had their first stand there.
It needs to be said as well that the first try to be scored in Thomond Park was scored by a man called Michael Fitzgerald, and of course the great Limerick rugby family. The Prices were represented in the conversion of that try by Eddie Price in that match. So that should be recorded as well there. So
I can also point out that the first match was played on the 50th anniversary of the beginnings of organised rugby in Limerick. So organised rugby in Limerick began in 1884, and the first match at Thomond Park was played in 1934. So there was a certain symmetry there in the manner in which the anniversary was marked.
And even to this day, I suppose, Matt, it hasn't featured a whole lot of full rugby internationals in there. I mean, the first rugby international to be played in Limerick from 1898, which we spoke about last week, and that famous Ireland-Wales match, wasn't played again, and this was a friendly played against Romania on the 7th of September 2002. So it wasn't getting a whole lot of matches up to that point. It
wasn't. And I suppose that was one of the reasons then why the ground was extensively redeveloped. Obviously, the redevelopment of Thomond Park was, the catalyst was the professionalisation of rugby around 20 odd years ago. And then, of course, we're familiar with the fact that between 2007 and 2008, the ground was completely redeveloped with the construction of 2 new stands. And of course, the capacity was greatly increased at that time. But you're quite right that I suppose while Thomond Park had acquired a very, I suppose, a reputation both locally and nationally as the home of Limerick rugby and of Munster rugby, the facilities didn't really catch up until comparatively recently.
And I suppose the other thing is that anybody that would like to know what the place looked like before the redevelopment happened, and maybe new to all of this, if you go back and look, and you'll probably find them on YouTube, the clips of the Munster All Blacks match in 1978, that wonderful 12-0 drubbing that we gave to the people from New Zealand, and that great Graham Mowry team. The facilities that day even were not salubrious by any stretch of the imagination.
No. And that was actually commented by some of the visitors at the time, that the facilities, I suppose, there was, a contrast between the performance on the field of play and the actual state of the ground itself. And a lot of this, of course, was just down again. There were similar problems with soccer venues, with GA venues. The resources were not available. It really was only with the advent of the economic prosperity of the 90s and noughties with the Celtic Tiger, really, that many of these venues were brought up to a standard that would be.
And as you say, the introduction of professional rugby and the success of that Munster rugby team, which brought that about as well. The other thing, I suppose, about Thomond Park is that, as against the Gaelic grounds, it has always been a very ecumenist ground, if you want to say that from a sporting perspective. And of course, Limerick FC have played there during their time. The Republic of Ireland have played there in terms of some soccer matches that have been there. The Special Olympics have featured there. And Rugby League has also played there over the period of time. And of course, all of these have, I suppose, also added to the allure of Thomond Park and brought up its profile, both nationally and internationally as well.
It has, or they have, I should say. And I think the physical appearance of the new Thomond Park that was constructed in 2007-08, it is really, to use your felicitous term, it is a cathedral of sport. It is one of the most impressive such grounds in these islands at this stage, and visible from all over the city. And I think that's a very important feature as well. I think from the beginning of sports stadia to their modern incarnation in the 19th, 20th, 21st centuries, I think they have to be physically imposing as well. And this is one area where Thomond Park certainly it compares favourably with a lot of other stadia in Ireland that may be larger in capacity, but don't have the physical attractiveness of Thomond Park itself.